Today's talk is titled Hot Dogs, Hopes, and Happiness, written by, I've got Reverend, is it Reverend David Bowen? Or Boyer. Okay. To be delivered by Kelly Teevan. Kelly moved to Cambria 2 years ago and joined the UUCC almost immediately. He has been a UU since 1982, when he joined the Community Church of New York in Manhattan. He was born in Michigan and has lived long stretches on both the East and West Coasts. He has a daughter, Ella, in Seattle, and another, Becca, in Oakland. And this is his third time in the pulpit here at UUCC. I think he's done better than me in 3 years, and I've done 28, so So here, I'm going to get this up for you. Whoa. Okay. Hang on, it just took a dive.
We get do-overs today.
We get do-overs. Yes, okay. There it is. Okay.
And this is an experiment trying to use the iPad. So good morning. Thank you all for turning out on a holiday weekend. This is really cool. My talk is, there's a sermon embedded in it, but I also have got bookends on it that are things that I wrote. So it's going to start with me and then go to this sermon by David Boyer. So today, hot dogs, hope, and happiness. I'm looking for my little stone that says hope. This weekend, our country celebrates the 250th anniversary of its founding. I could not ignore that in preparing today's service. I was alive when the U.S. turned 175, July 4, 1951. And I recall the bicentennial, including a glass jar of instant Maxwell House coffee with an eagle embossed on it. Our amazing experiment in self-government continues. The 4th of July makes me think of sparklers and hot dogs, hence that piece of the title of this talk. A tip of the hat to the 250th, but the founding of the U.S. is not tangential to today's topic, happiness. That concept is baked into the founding document, as you heard in the first reading of the Declaration of Independence, where happiness was twice mentioned, right up there with life and liberty. I will be reading a sermon by Reverend David Boyer about happiness, slightly shortened. Another word in my title is hope. Here in mid-2026, we hold out hope for the continuing primacy of the U.S. Constitution. Can it long endure? As Lincoln said. Well, hope is about all that I had going for me when I first heard this sermon, if that. It was delivered at the UU Church of Manchester, New Hampshire, on June 13, 2010, where my wife of 20-plus years, Anne, and I had been members since moving from San Francisco to New Hampshire in 1994. Our kids were RE kids at that church from the nursery up. Reverend Boyer was interim co-minister at UUCM, as was his wife, Reverend Stephanie Nichols. They were from Winchester, just south of the border into Massachusetts. This was Dave's probably his last sermon there, as UUCM could not afford to support a minister in the summers. So 2 months earlier, on a Saturday walk with Anne, she sat me down on a cold cemetery bench, of all places, and revealed she had someone else in her life. And as far as I know, to this day, our kids do not know this. They aren't watching this. That began a process that led to separation nearly 2 years later and divorce 2 years after that. The next day was Easter Sunday, and I sat in church for the first time ever feeling despair on a holiday. I'd heard other people experience this, not infrequently. Here it is, it's a holiday and they don't feel good. Well, I felt it for the first time. The day before, after Anne's revelation, wounded and lost, I resorted to calling Reverend Dave for help, for anything. Anne, in turn, called Reverend Stephanie. his wife. Things rapidly got a lot more painful, and leaving out the details of that whole process, I'll say that we each soon found counselors. Mine happened also to be named Dave. Hers also happened to be named Stephanie. We also found a couples counselor, a former minister, and his name was Dave also. we were using a lot of support out there. We worked on it for a couple of years. We had our kids to consider. We needed to learn tools for clear and honest communication and tools for dealing with conflict. Didn't really have those. Was there any hope? I still had some after the initial shocks. So that was the context for my hearing this sermon that I'm about to read 16 years ago, marked at the top of my copy in pencil, June 13, 2010, our 1/2 anniversary. Ugh. So now this is What About Happiness by Dave Boyer. So, you want to be happy. Some time ago, I enjoyed a movie in which a young Hispanic woman is trying to find herself in the world. She tries to balance her parents' expectations and her passion for a college education. During an argument with her mother, she is asked, "What is it you want?" To which the girl answers, "I want to be happy." Her mother replies, "Happy? You want to be happy? Your father and I aren't happy." It's a funny and memorable moment because it plays many chords at once, not the least of which is that some folks find themselves so busy doing what they think they ought to do that they can forget to pursue their own happiness. They live their lives like Albert Camus' character in The Misunderstanding, who declares, "Happiness is not everything, and men have their duties." But it also raises the question, what is this thing we call happiness about anyway? What is it? What does it mean for our lives? Do we want to be happy? Should we go after happiness above all else? The pursuit of happiness. We know it is enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The founders of this country believed the pursuit of happiness was a fundamental human right, an unalienable right. And I would hazard to guess that each and every one of us has taken part in this pursuit during the course of our lives. This morning I would like to address this unalienable right, scratch the surface of what happiness might be and why we have so much trouble finding it. I know for sure the struggle to find happiness begins early. When I was young, I knew what stood between me and my pursuit of happiness. It was my parents. I was convinced that what I needed most of all was not better grades or more friends, but one of those other fundamental rights, liberty. What stood between me and happiness was my parents' control over my life. I was wrong, of course, but it seemed to me the most likely solution to the query, am I happy, and if not, why not? As I grew older, I began to realize that this supposed barrier to happiness was a convenient fallacy. And sometimes I believed so that I believed something I believed, so I didn't have to accept responsibility for my own happiness. It's an excuse that many adults use as well. We simply replace the parent with another authority and believe them to be the barrier to our happiness. We say, I'm not happy because my boss didn't promote me, or laws prohibit me from racing my car down the highway, or my wife doesn't want me to skydive, We would prefer that someone else was responsible for any potential dissatisfaction with ourselves. Perhaps rather than finding excuses for our misery, we might do better looking around at who is happy. This is going to be great. And see what they are doing or not doing that makes them happy. It makes sense that if we can understand the conditions under which others are happy, we might be able to find happiness as well. The happiest people in the world. This is Randy at work. Well, who is happy anyway? Every year, scientists do studies rating the happiness of the citizens of countries around the world. In fact, for the past decade, social scientists and pollsters have given elaborate questionnaires to hundreds of thousands of people around the globe. They tell us that those who live in democracies tend to be happier than those who live under repressive dictatorships. This year, and that's 2010, or that says 4, well, it's got Denmark at the top. And yeah, okay. This was, I believe, this is written in 2010. This year, the most happy people seem to live in Denmark. Last year it was Finland, and the least happy in Zimbabwe. So I had part of the equation right when I was an adolescent. Freedom is an element in happiness. But then, as critics quickly point out, it's not as clear as all that. Not all folks who live in societies that become freer report an increase in happiness. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true. And it's often noticed that most of the happier countries are also some of the richer ones as well, and the poorest always report being unhappy. It's been said that money can't buy happiness, but it does seem to help a lot. But that's not the whole picture. Curiously enough, those who live in Denmark share a common complaint about their lives: high taxes. Turns out that the happiest people in the world pay some of the highest taxes in the world, between 50 and 70% of their income. But in exchange, the government covers the cost of all health care, all education, and spends more per capita on children and the elderly than any other country in the world. So ironically, then, while money helps, not having to worry about money helps even more. Which, of course, brings us back to the ageless issue of what should one pursue in this pursuit of happiness. Over the course of my lifetime, and he was younger than I have heard it all: money, fame, power, sex, family, friends, notoriety, character, morality, good health, spirituality, clean living, simple living, Martha Stewart living, and on and on. Most of us shift back and forth between priorities such as these at different times in our lives. And if we ever stop to think of it, which we mostly do not, we will realize that no one pursuit leads to happiness. Something always seems to get left out. Stuff. There is a tenuous relationship between acquiring material possessions and happiness. My wife Stephanie and I decided to downsize. Not only did we go from 3 cars to 1, we also got rid of enormous amounts of stuff that we had: table saws, air compressors, furniture, tools, books, appliances, air conditioners, bookcases, a VW bus, and materials for 1,000 unfinished projects had to go. After we sold and gave away everything we could, we still had so much stuff it took a 40-yard dumpster to dispose of the remainder. Afterwards, I have to say that it felt great. In fact, the whole dislodging makes me feel happy to think about it. No longer are we obligated to store, care for, maintain, and worry, and I would say, and maybe insure. All that stuff is just gone. Liberation. And yet it is not lost on me that hardly any of that stuff we liberated ourselves from was foolishly acquired. I am the pack rat in the family, and yet I also realize that each item we added to our collection of stuff had embodied within it some hope or promise of making ourselves happier. While I was in college, I had no stuff. I can recall clearly how happy I was to get an old dining table and a comfy couch. Can any of you remember that? It's like, man, that guy has a sofa. Oh, man. When you have no stuff, some stuff can make you happy. But like so many things, there are diminishing returns. A certain amount of stuff is necessary, but at some point, more stuff doesn't make you happier. And eventually you find out that anticipating getting new stuff brings more pleasure than actually getting the stuff, which often doesn't make us feel the way we thought it might. For everyone that thought that more cars or homes or boats or computers would make them happy, there are just as many folks who had to ultimately say to themselves, well, that just wasn't exactly it. How can we get it so wrong? Lots of ways. Years ago, the psychiatrist Thomas Zaz told us that happiness is an imaginary condition. Ouch. My intuition tells me that there's a bit more to it than that, although I admit happiness is hard to grasp. Daniel Gilbert, whom we heard this in the second reading, a psychology professor from Harvard, says that we humans are pretty lousy predictors of what will make us happy. We think we know what we are looking for, but we repeatedly miss the mark. Part of the problem, which he outlines in his delightful book, Stumbling on Happiness, maybe some of you have seen it, is that almost all of our efforts are future-directed. That is, very often we make sacrifices in the present so that our future selves will live better and be happier. But once we arrive at that point, our future selves have a low opinion of the preparations and sacrifices made. This future self that we are constantly accommodating, Gilbert calls our temporal progeny, it's us later, and he pointed out that they are as ungrateful as any progeny could be. It makes me think of one of my favorite quotes: if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. But it also begs the question, how can we get it so wrong? Gilbert points out that human beings are simply not very good predictors of the future. Of course, any stock market person will tell you that. We simply can't know what the future will be like. What's worse, we have no idea how we are going to feel when the future arrives, and happiness, more than anything else, is a feeling. Now, what is happiness? After all, the answer is frustratingly difficult to find, and I've eliminated some of the answers that his things he looked for, if only because what makes one person happy may not make another happy at all. That is why some social scientists don't even like the term. They prefer instead something called subjective well-being. How's your SWB today? According to Ed Diener of the University of Illinois, subjective well-being refers to how people evaluate their lives and includes variables such as life satisfaction and marital satisfaction, lack of depression and anxiety, and positive moods and emotions. University of California professor of psychology Sonia Lyubomirsky, if you can pronounce that, author of the book The How of Happiness, suggests that happiness can be defined only in the present moment. Her definition of happiness, let's see, it makes me think of Ram Dass's classic book, Be Here Now. Her definition of happiness is, quote, the experience of frequent positive emotions and a sense that your life is good, you are satisfied with the way your life is going at the moment, unquote. Bye, Kat. An interesting thing about Professor Lyubomirsky's work is that she has come to believe that a person's happiness quotient is at least half innate. That is, 50% of what causes one to report themselves happy is genetic. And then she claims that only 10% is due to life circumstances. 10%. Fortunately, she allows that the remaining 40% of our potential for happiness is under our control, but unfortunately, she calls this room for improvement. Something to think about, and not ought. At this point, you must be thinking if happiness doesn't necessarily come from having money or stuff or fame or even freedom, what is it we are supposed to pursue in this pursuit of happiness? Over the centuries, philosophers and theologians have tried to find some answers to this exact question. As you might expect. Being philosophers and theologians, they have tended to identify things like virtue and morality with happiness, mostly because that's the sort of happiness they think we ought to have. And as you might have heard me say before, ought to is a rather unconvincing argument. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all teach that a certain portion of human happiness in this life is up to God. We're told that God grants wisdom and favor to those who live and worship in the right way. In this view, the goal is to live a virtuous life, to be true to God's teaching and admonitions, for then you will be given happiness. I don't have a problem with that. A whole lot of people being moral and virtuous has got to be a good thing. Kind, generous, forgiving, worshipful people do make the world a better place. Yet, as Daniel Gilbert, the Harvard guy, points out, if living one's life virtuously is a cause of happiness, it is not happiness itself. And it does us no good to obfuscate a discussion by calling both the cause and the consequence by the same name. I get lost in this one a lot, like what leads to it and what is it? And so we realize that many of the arguments religion makes about happiness suffer the same difficulties that we find in the secular approach. The path and the destination are not one and the same, and we do ourselves no good by believing they are. And we have to admit that there's some rather unvirtuous folks in the world who consider themselves quite happy. Living in a moral and upstanding fashion is a good way, maybe even the best way to be happy. It just isn't the only or guaranteed method. Buddhism might come as close as any religion to understanding the problem. A Buddhist friend of mine described happiness in a formula which goes like this. It's going to appear. Happiness equals the number of desires fulfilled divided by the number of desires created. Okay, so fulfilled is the numerator, created is the denominator, right? And the quotient. Thus, happiness increases if you increase the numerator, as one feels happy as soon as one's desire is fulfilled, or you decrease the denominator, right, and create fewer desires. As the mind is capable of increasing the denominator endlessly, and there are practical limitations to increasing the numerator, it's better to train oneself to generate fewer desires. So where does this leave us all? Hopefully, I've entertained you with some ideas of how happiness is achieved and what some of the common pitfalls and misconceptions might be. You might also suspect by now that I'm not going to give you any definitive answers to your own happiness. It seems that that is a personal composition that each of us takes a lifetime to work on. But I will leave you with my own short list, a sort of Reverend Dave's prescriptions for happiness. So here it is. Love someone deeply. Love saves us from all sorts of things and makes us better human beings. We are designed for love. Trust God. It might sound corny to say that God has a plan for me, but sometimes it does work out that way. It seems that way. If you are agnostic or atheist, imagine being part of something bigger than yourself. Be grateful, be gracious, be forgiving. What can I say? Such virtues. Never wear thin and always work to everyone's well-being. Do healthy things for your body. What can I say? Everyone has been telling us this since we were little. Cultivate a passion. Life loves a passion. Lose yourself in something. Do something with excellence. Appreciate the wonder of nature. Nature always seems the best balm for any misfortune, and if you take the time to look and listen, it can be infinitely awe-inspiring. And finally, live in the moment. Slow down, be happy now, not later. For later may never come, or it may be different than we could have guessed. Repeats here, be here now. And he says, and so that's it. I would recommend that sometime today, you make your own list of how to be happy, what you need to get there, and keep it real. As one wise person put it, we all live with the objective of being happy. Our paths are all different, and yet we are all on the same journey. It's Anne Frank adapted. So that's the end of his talk. I made my own list, not to replace Reverend Dave's list, but as a supplement. So here are my own action verbs from my approach to seeking happiness. And other people got to do in their announcements, got to do addenda. I already had one. So, seek stillness. I could just say that. Practice awareness, patience, humility, courage, and gratitude. Choose a path with heart. Connect with people daily. Keep showing up. Be a bringer of joy. If not of joy, of humor. Give of yourself. Embrace the spiritual value of generosity, whether material, emotional, or spiritual. And turn it over. It's a little like Reverend Dave's Trust God. Jackson Brown wrote, lighten up while you still can and take it easy. And almost finally, remember, as Peter Mayer wrote, everything is holy now. And then almost finally, let's see. I want to thank the people who made this happen. Our music people, Mary and Jan, worship associate Janet, and Randy in the pit, who came up with all these slides. I mean, this is, wow. It was fun to see them. You could hire him to do it, probably.
Oh, yes. Well, the MC did this. Nice.
And then, finally, you can't be me without Dr. Seuss. So, from the Oh, the Places You'll Go, the very final page. So, be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Allen Van Allen O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. And that's it.